Hello and welcome to Filmy Ladies. Instead of focusing on the virtues that one often associates with January, we are kicking off a series of films that relate to the seven deadly sins, as defined by various Christian traditions, and obviously lots of worldviews view a lot of these things as bad or sinful or whatever. So we're going with these ones that we are familiar with from mostly from literature, I assume, and just general sort of American culture. For those of you who are unfamiliar, let me rattle off what the seven deadly sins are. You can probably guess. They are pride, greed, gluttony, sloth, envy, lust, and wrath.
Mhm.
These are all bad things, by the way. And so we are starting off with pride, which in some ways I think is the most complicated of them, it seems to me, and maybe the one that most easily ties to all the others. We are not getting into the sort of history of Christian theology about these things. So, like, if you have different definitions of these, that's fine. This is not a theology podcast. This is a filmy podcast. We're not theology ladies. So we're kind of taking an expansive view of a lot of these things, and I'm really excited. I think this was Pitu's idea, actually,
Mhm.
and I just think it's going to be such a rich source of conversation, and it's a really interesting way to look at films. And there were so many things that came to mind for me when I was kind of thinking through what I wanted to do. I actually have an idea that I was going to try to do all of them with Shashi Kapoor films, but then I got all tangled up in myself and whatever. So that's not going to happen. But I think you will see Shashi Kapoor appearing frequently in my selections. I don't know if Pitu has a theme among hers. Um, do you have any
Kinda.
themes emerging? Yeah. Okay. Do you want to say what it is or leave it for later?
Of the first 3 movies that I've thought of for the first 3 cents, 2 of them have Aishwarya Rai in it.
Okay.
So that is the
Okay.
theme. But I also made a conscious decision that I'm not gonna do any Shah Rukh Khan films
Oh,
because
nice.
I need to rein in some of my fanatical
He's been
fandom.
he's been covered a lot on the first year and a half or so of our podcast. So
Yeah.
he is well represented. If you haven't noticed, there's a whole playlist for the episodes we have that talk about him in a significant way. So those are well covered. So what are you going to use to talk about pride?
Yay! I'm going to talk about one of my favorite movies that I have been dying to talk about ever since we launched this podcast, which is Raincoat.
Ooh.
Um, this is the 2004 movie made by Rituparna Ghosh. I love his films, and this movie is just firing on all cylinders. It has
Mm,
Aishwarya Rai, whom I adore. It has Ajay Devgan, whom I am neutral about, but when he acts well, he really brings it. Like I like him in Zakham and things like that. So I
mm.
like him in this movie. It has Anu Kapoor, who is not someone that I ever think of like I don't care about him one way or the other, but he's so good in it. The music is one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. It is by Debojyoti Mishra. The art direction is on point. Everything about this film is so perfect. And it's also it's an adaptation of a story by O. Henry. It's an adaptation of Gift of the Magi. And we have covered O. Henry before
Mhm.
in the Lutera episode because that
Mhm.
movie is based on The Last Leaf. So I've come to the conclusion that O. Henry is just like perfect for like Bollywood
I
cinema.
mean, the Gift of the Magi is one of those stories that if I have actually read the story, I don't know, but I've seen adaptations of this growing up my whole life. Like, this is very big in sort of
It's so popular.
Protestant American culture that I grew up in or whatever. I'm sure it's other places too, but this is a super, super common source, it seems to me. Enough that I find myself referring to it every now and again,
Mhm.
not like, "Oh, I'm going to make a literary analogy here." I'll just be like, "Oh, how Gift of the Magi," you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's
Gift of
it's
the
everywhere.
Magi is also super popular in India because at
Mm,
least for those of us who went to English medium schools, it
sure.
literally used to be part of like the lesson plan or whatever. So as long as you went to an
Interesting.
English medium school, at some point during your middle schooling years, you would have studied Gift of the Magi for like your exam. So pretty much every
Mm,
Indian who went to English medium schools knows this story because we were graded
mm,
on it. And I what I really love about Raincoat is that even though the source material is clearly Western, you wouldn't know it at all because this movie is so like steeped in Calcutta and the Bihari culture and stuff like that. And it's unbelievable how that translated. And I want more O. Henry movies to be made, books to be made into movies.
I mean, I think one could argue that Calcutta is the most Euro influenced of the major Indian cities.
Mm,
Probably. I feel like I get that vibe from what or maybe it's just the way it's depicted in films, but um
I don't know about that.
it's super, I don't know, I feel like Calcutta is extremely Euro in a lot of ways, not in all ways,
Mhm.
obviously, but in a lot of them. But that's neither here nor there. It's just kind of I want to, after you talk about the movie, I do want to talk about like what you think the Calcutta setting does for it. But
Well, you don't actually see much of Calcutta in it
mm,
because this movie is very like sort of like a chamber play in the
mm,
sense that there's just like essentially three characters and it's all interior. It's all pretty much interior shots of these like two rooms. And apparently it was shot um in an actual apartment building
oh
in
wow.
Calcutta. Like because the residents of that building are actually like thanked or whatever in the credits. And it's constantly raining. So this is not like studio sets or anything like
Right,
that.
right.
And so you don't actually see any of the city. You just see these interior shots. And I love the blues and the greens and the persistent rain. It's constantly raining in this movie from beginning to end, and you can almost feel the dampness, like you can almost smell the mold in the
Mm,
walls, which is so amazing. And then Gulzar's poetry, like he has this whole like spoken word thing where he talks about how there's a breeze that came and dislodged one of the pictures on the wall, and it's so brilliant.
mm,
um I really love that. I also, one of the things that I give props to Rituparna Ghosh for is that this is one of the few movies I've seen in which Bihari people are treated like actual human
mm,
beings, because typically Bihar is probably India's most maligned state,
yeah,
and if someone is cast as a Bihari person in an Indian movie, they're almost always going to be a thug or a gunda or a crook or an uneducated lout. There's never, and they're always caricatures. They're
yeah.
never people who have actual like agency or anything like that. And even though this movie is set in Calcutta, it does talk about the huge Bihari migrant community that that city has, and they're not caricatures, and they're not like, they're just normal, regular people who just happen to be Bihari. And so I do give props to Rituparna Ghosh for that as well. I also like the little things in it that one may not catch immediately. Like Aishwarya's character's name is Nirja, which literally means lotus.
Mm,
And of course, the lotus is important in Hinduism because it represents how you can be pure and clean and beautiful despite living in filth and muck. And she literally lives in filth and muck. But she never lets go of her humanity, which is of course the whole like angle of the Gift of the Magi part of it. Um, and I think this movie is such a good exploration of the concept of pride, um, or more to what Indians like to call, like we like to call it prestige for some reason.
mm,
Um, that it's that pride. It's not like the pride as in, you know, ego. Well, it's kind of like ego. The whole movie is basically Ajay Devgan and Aishwarya Rai telling each other tall tales about how great their life is, like how amazing their life is, and all these amazing things that they're doing. And all of it is a lie. It's all like pie in the sky. And they're doing that to protect their own ego, but they're also doing that to protect each other so that the other person does not understand or realize how much misery they're in. And so what I like about it is that I think typically in Indian cinema, at least when pride is depicted, it's always depicted in this very like larger than life way where the person is clearly bad and horrible and a megalomaniac, like Amitabh in Abhiman, or
mm,
Amitabh in Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum, or Amitabh in 1 million movies, where he goes on into like Pratishtha, Anushasan, whatever mode, or like Mohabbate. So pride is always depicted in this very grandiose way where it's not relatable. How many of us can relate
mm,
to the principle of Gurukul in Mohabbat? Very few of us can. But when you see pride depicted the way it is in Raincoat, where it's the little white lies and the fibs and
mm,
the pretending to be someone you're not and the image consciousness, that is something most people do. Almost
mm,
everybody does that, where they try to present this facade of I am so insert blank like word here, and they're not quite that. So I like that the movie is so nuanced, which of course is Rituparna Ghosh. It's gonna be nuanced. He's not gonna hit you over the head with a saucepan. He's not Karan Johar. Um, but I like the softness in it. I like that even though it's clearly weird what they're doing, but it's not really wrong in the sense that they're not hurting anyone. And so I like the gentleness of this film, and I
Mm,
like it doesn't demonize them, and they're doing these weird things, and they're being a little weird, and you chuckle at it, but you also feel so bad for them. And like I want to be friends with Nirja, and I want to take her
mm,
out of that house, that horrible, bleak, terrible house, and I want to like I don't know, help her in some way and encourage her to like be her own person. And
mm.
there's a book that I don't know if you've read it, but I like the title of it. It's called At the Villa of Reduced
Oh,
Circumstances.
yeah, yeah.
And every time I think of Raincoat, I think of that title, At the Villa of Reduced Circumstances. Like that's it's so that. And so I like the gentleness and the kindness of it, and I like the relatability of it, in that we may
Mm,
not all be the liars and fibbers that these two characters are, Manu and Nirja, but we've all fibbed and lied, and usually it's just to protect our fragile little ego. So yeah, you've seen Raincoat, I presume?
no, I haven't,
You have to. It is
and
so good. It's a
so
9,000.
it sounds like this is not looking at pride in the sense of hubris.
Yes. I think it comes from a place of kindness
Mm,
and trying to protect someone else's feelings because you know
mm,
that they care about you. And so I think that's also why I
interesting.
love those characters, because I know that it's there's a scene in Perdes, which that movie is just like it's hideous, okay, but there's brief moments in it. Like there's a scene in it where Mahima Chaudhary has had this huge raging fight and she's crying, she's weeping, but then
Mm.
she gets a phone call from her mom, and she quickly wipes her tears, and on the phone she puts on a brave face and she's like,
Oh,
yes, life
yeah.
is great, everything is wonderful. That's Yes, she's lying, but she's doing that to protect her mother because she doesn't want her mom to worry for her. And like in that scene, for instance, my heart really broke for Mahima, because again, all of us
Mm,
done that. We've all put on a brave face and pretended things were better when they really weren't.
mm,
And so I think that's where Raincoat comes from as well, where it's like pride and prestige, but more like not wanting to ruffle too many things and not trying to upset someone, rather than I'm going to present this image because I'm just a megalomaniac.
right, right.
Yeah, but you should watch it. I think you will love
Yeah,
it. It's
yeah,
unbelievable, and Aishwarya's performance in it is great. Ajay Devgan's casting, I think, is brilliant, because I would not have thought of him in the role of Manu, but he
right.
is great in it as well. Everything about the movie is phenomenal. The vocals are by Shubha Mudgal. Oh, her voice is just divine in this film. It's just the movie is firing on all cylinders. It never gets boring. It is a sad film though. There's a lot of melancholia in it. So
Mm. I'm glad that you're bringing a Rituparna Ghosh film to this podcast because I don't think we've talked about any of them yet, at least not at length. And I've only seen a handful so far, but the ones I've seen have all been
yeah,
excellent.
I'm
It
actually
is.
gonna talk about Chokherwali. That was the other
Ah!
Aishwarya Rai, and that happens to be Ritu Ghosh, so
And same year, right, that they came out?
I don't know.
I
Was it?
think
Okay.
I think so. And I have seen that, although it's been a very long time, so I would need to rewatch it. But
Mhm.
um he's his films are quite amazing.
Yes, they are. Such a sad loss. It always makes me sad he died
Absolutely.
so young.
So
Yeah,
young. Yeah.
so you picked Kalyug?
Ooh, I picked Kalyug, which is
Tell
uh
people which Kalyug so they don't think it's the Kunal
right.
Khemu Kalyug.
So someone said that to me on Twitter, and I was like, oh, it's the Sham Benegal one with
Yeah.
produced by Shashi Kapoor, starring Shashi Kapoor and everyone else that you could possibly want. I suspect that this is kind of the opposite of Raincoat. It is a very Indian source. Can I just
Yes.
note that people on Twitter were telling me that's an adaptation of the Mahabharata, and I'm like, yeah, I know.
Right.
Like, I've been watching Indian films for almost 20 years.
Beth, do
I
you know who Shashi
know.
Kapoor is? Do you know who Shyam
Right.
Benegal is? But have you heard of Rekha? You should watch Rekha's movies.
Right. So this I want to say first off, I've never read much of the Mahabharata. I've read little bits. Um, I am somewhat familiar with parts of it, but not really. So like but I'm here to say that if you, like me, don't know this material, this film still works beautifully. You can still get a lot out of it. You don't need, I'm sure I'd get more out of it if I knew those things, but I
Mm,
don't, and I still feel like it's giving plenty. Um,
yeah,
and it, in many ways is an epic about families and how they think of themselves and think of their duties and their, relationships and their identities and all these kinds of things.
machinations.
Yeah. So I think that I could actually talk about this movie for all of the seven deadly sins, quite
Yeah.
frankly. I was actually going through, and I think maybe not gluttony, but the rest of
Right.
them, and there's some drinking in this, so I think that you could sort of swing it towards alcohol, but otherwise, they're all here.
Yeah.
Um, so I might be referring back to this film over the course of this series, but
Yeah.
so the gist is there are these two branches of a family, the descendants of two brothers who are both in the same approximate line of business. What is this business? I don't know. It's business, 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 business. It involves machinery, it involves steel importing, it involves government contracts. I don't know what they do. They're engineering something, something. I don't know.
They're busy.
They're busy doing their business. There's labor unrest, all sorts of things happen, and they use their businesses to sort of peck away at each other's
Mm,
prestige and place in the economy, but I assume also sort of place in the general sense of whatever society it is that they live in. They are in Mumbai. Um, I don't, you never really see anyone who's not part of this family or who doesn't work for them. So the idea
mm,
of like the pride that they are trying to establish and enforce is very internal to themselves, I think, which is
mm.
really interesting. You never get outsiders commenting on them. Every now and again, like a bank manager will call them or something like that, but it's all very much about, it's all framed in this world of whatever it is that this work is
It's
that they
very
do.
insular.
It's very insular. The families are huge. If like me, you are easily confused, I do have annotated family trees. They put some up in the beginning of the film, and I actually went through and annotated who was who to try to make it more clear for dum-dums like me. This movie is magnificent. If people haven't seen it, they really should. I mean, Shashi Kapoor, the producer, is A plus. Shyam Benegal, obviously A plus. Everyone in here is so, so
The
good.
cast is a who's who.
The cast is amazing. You have Raj Babar, who is maybe at first you're like, he's kind of the weakest link among the
Mm,
big names in a way, but actually he's really good. I
mm.
thought he plays the oldest brother of one of the families, but he is not terribly interested in the business and is kind of more interested in other things, but not in a disgraceful way, just in a like,
Mhm.
oh, his nature is something else. He's married to Rekha, who clearly should be involved in the business, but is
Yeah.
not, I guess, because she's a woman. They don't really go into that terribly much, but I think it's there for you to pick up on. Um, then you get Kulbhushan Kharbanda, who is the next brother, and he's kind of the hothead.
Mm,
Um, but also the big emoter because he, spoiler alert, accidentally causes the death of someone and is just distraught, is absolutely distraught. Their younger brother is Bharat Nag, who is definitely the brains of the operation on that side of the family. Then the other branch has Victor Banerjee as the older brother. Then there's a younger brother who, spoiler alert, is killed. And Shashi Kapoor plays one of their main advisors or co-business leaders. Who is revealed at the end of the film to have an actual relationship into these families that most people were not aware of, except for the
mhm.
elders who are really keeping mum about this. And Amrish Puri is also, he's with the other family. He's the advisor kind of on their side, and he is Rekha's brother. Then his daughter marries into the family. So it's all and by the time the movie's like kind of halfway through, you get a good handle. Even if you didn't start out with a handle on who these people are, you get it. But the reason this movie came to mind for me when I was thinking about pride was just that it really seems to me that this is what is motivating them. And even if you back it up to sort of what are their various duties, it still seems like those duties are capitalistic, and greed is also very interwoven with this one. I
Yeah.
think I could have really picked it for either, but um there really is this just undercurrent, this constant churning of we have to be better than that other branch. And even when some of the elders and the women start to get really concerned about this is going too far, like
Mm.
the younger men do not back down, and destruction destruction comes about. And at
Ensues.
the end of the film, um, I'd be really interested if people wanted to talk about the end of this film. So, for example, again, spoiler alert, you will, um, as um, the youngest brother on the bigger side is really just so churned up over what has happened. Um, and you see him kind of having almost kind of seems like he's about to have a nervous breakdown. Multiple deaths have happened at this point, and an identity has been revealed that's very catastrophic to them for whatever reasons. I think you could make some guesses about in the film, and that's where not knowing the Mahabharata I think will come in,
Mm.
because I think I'm kind of guessing at some people's reactions, whereas people who know the story would say, "Oh, it's very
Right.
likely X." Um, the person he seeks comfort with is not his wife, but is Rekha,
Mm.
his oldest brother's wife. And to me, this film has always felt a lot like The Godfather.
Yeah.
And so Rekha mirrors the K figure really well, I think, in some ways. Um, and you just wonder, like, are we setting up a new dynasty here where the brother and the
Mhm.
sister-in-law are going to sort of join forces to resurrect the business? Is there some other relationship that's going to try to form with them? I don't think that's really implied in the film, again, if you don't know the background especially. But there's just it's not, there's not resolution in this story, and you can tell it could keep going a long time. Not that I think anyone should make a follow-up to this. I think they should
Right.
leave it exactly where it is, because it's basically a masterpiece, I think. But
Yeah.
it is really wonderful. And just watching Pride, I think, is the of the seven sins, is the one that most gets at your own sense of yourself. And
Your ego.
yeah, and not just ego in terms of like an inflated ego, but you're really like, who my identity, who am I? And that is very rattled for almost all the characters in this film. And the information that those things, that those senses contain or don't contain or get bombarded by. And it's just it's a very, very, very compelling film. It's
Mhm.
so well made. If you haven't watched it in a while, rewatch it, I would say. I mean, I don't want to be like, oh, newsflash, Shyam Benegal is really good,
Yeah.
but he really is. This film is just fabulous. Do you remember the visuals of the film very well from when you saw it last?
Vaguely, there's a lot of, like, monochromes, lots of monotones in it, lots of grays,
Yeah,
which I
so
think is great.
it's 1981. Things are a little bit muted, I would agree, like a
Mhm.
lot, but the interiors in this film are so beautiful. Like, these are wealthy people and these are
Mhm.
classy people.
Yeah.
There is no showiness about them, or if there is, it's in that very understated way of like, I bought this very expensive antique statue or a painting. So it's like,
Mhm.
refined
It's, like,
knowledge-based
hushed.
acquisitions. Yeah, quiet
Yeah.
luxury all the way. It's got a lot of that kind of 70s color palette of like browns and oranges and things like
Mhm.
that, but also a lot of white, a lot
The
of red.
fashions also.
Oh yeah, everybody looks like $1 million. There's a lot of
Mhm.
interesting stuff going on with clothing, for example. I feel like so I've noted this before when I've watched the film, so I was trying to keep my eye out for it. I don't think Shashi Kapoor appears in traditional Indian clothes until very late in the film, when you start to
Mhm.
kind of other things start to happen. He's always in a Western suit, for example.
Right.
Now, a lot of the men are wearing suits for their business purposes, but you see them in various other clothes at various times, and the women are always wearing saris in this
Yeah.
film, except maybe the youngest one. Um, there's amazing scenes of funerals and where everyone's in white, and like the women march in, and I mean, they are in formation, the women of the
Right.
family, like, flanked and
Right.
rigid. There's just so much interesting stuff happening. There's a lot of books, there's a lot of really lovely music.
Mhm.
Um, the whole plot about labor unrest is really interesting, and how the families are kind of using strikers to rattle each other. They are stealing imports from one another, like the police are involved, all sorts of stuff is
They
going
seem
on.
very exhausting.
They
They seem
are.
very, very tiring.
They
And I'm
are.
happy that my family does not indulge in these things because I don't think I would have the energy for any of this.
This is one of these stories that obviously could be exceptionally filmy if you treated it
Yes.
that way, but because this is the production that it is, like, it is all tight, controlled, there's a lot of suppression of feelings, and when things do kind of bubble up or someone
Mm,
finally reveals a piece of information, it's still done it's very dramatic because it's inherently dramatic, not because they have
right.
blown it up,
It's not
which is
shouty.
no, and I love a film where people are blowing things up emotionally and
Right.
whatever. It's not I'm not against that, but this is not filmy in any way except for the actual drama inherent to the
Yeah.
story, the ancient story, we must
Yeah.
we must say. So, like, yeah, I'm sure I'll come back to this film over the course of the 7 Deadly Sins in particular because they are all there.
Now, I know you pulled out your DVD that you have, but
Yeah.
for people who don't own it on DVD, where would they watch it? Because I watched Raincoat on 9000.
Someone asked me that on Twitter yesterday. It is on YouTube, but I do not believe that
Okay.
has subtitles, and I have not
Okay.
been able to find it streaming with subtitles other places. So this might have to be a DVD. If you do not speak Hindi and you want to watch this, just get the DVD. It's so worth it. Your public library might even have it,
Right.
honestly. Like, it's such a classic in many ways, right? The source is a classic, and this particular telling is a classic.
Yeah.
It's always on people's lists of top films, like it's in one of Anupama Chopra's lists of like 50 favorite Hindi films and things like that. So I can't imagine it's super hard to get. Um, it, I don't think you could make a good go of it without subtitles, honestly, because
Yeah,
it
no.
strikes me as a lot of fairly subtle language, or at least subtly expressed language. And this is not a like Kuragawa is the film I always go to when I talk about shouting Hindi that even I can understand without subtitles. This doesn't have that. Now, people do shout from time to time, and you are going to
Right.
get there are words you will know from masala intake, but this is not. I think get your subtitles. Definitely
It's
get your
too
subtitles.
complex and it's too complicated and it's too nuanced and it's too detailed. This is also
Yeah,
not a movie that you can watch at the end of a day. You need to be paying attention.
put
You
your
need to
phone
have like 2
away.
espresso shots.
Pay attention. Yeah, because there
Yes.
are and while in some ways it is episodic, like one family does a thing to the other and then it escalates and then it escalates. There are obviously a lot of things that loop back and forth upon each other, and things that you saw an hour and a half ago are actually important to what you're seeing now. So I think, yeah, pay attention, get the subtitles.
Yeah.
um
You know, I wanted to pick up on something that you just said because, like, I love art films. I love the new
yeah,
wave cinema as well, and all of those movies from like the 70s and the 80s are like I have such a soft place in my heart for them. And I get this a lot from people where they'll be like, "Oh, but like art films are so depressing and they're so sad, and it's all like villagers and it's poverty." And I was like, "Okay, first of all, there is nothing wrong with villagers or poverty. Stop being an
right.
elitist prick." But also, what is interesting to note is that when you watch art films from the 70s, they actually knew what the truly wealthy live like. The way
Yeah.
that commercial cinema portrays the
Yeah.
wealthy is not how the true wealthy live. Like when you look at like a Yash Chopra movie or a Karan Johar movie, that is their idea of wealthy, but that is actually how the nouveau riche live. Those upside down
Ah,
cakes that they live in and the
right.
loud everything. Have you ever met like a truly wealthy person? They are like hushed and they're just
Yeah,
everything about them is it's actually intimidating to
and I
someone
gotta
like me who is
say,
loud.
yeah, like, nobody is doing this like Shashi Kapoor.
Yes.
Obviously, we know the man wears a suit. Yes,
Yes.
his wife is the costume designer on this film, and I don't know if she
Yeah.
did all of them. She believes she's just listed as costumes, and I was asking
Okay.
Twitter yesterday if anyone knew if she did all of them, because I think Reka in particular also looks amazing in
Mm.
this film wardrobe-wise. Um, he's got, you see him with a little cup of espresso. You see him with his beautiful stereo system. He's got a million billion books, most of them like art books
Yeah.
that looks like. He's got, this beautiful balcony that he sits out on and listens to his Western classical music while he has a drink at the end of the day overlooking the
Yeah.
sea. Like, man is oozing class
Yeah.
of a certain kind. And like it's interesting too that it's not since less than in the last year we saw Rocky or Ronnie, where we have two very different versions of Indian upper class
Mhm.
wealth and privilege presented. This one is somewhere it's neither of those, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it kind of leans more towards the Bengali, like uber educated, and we want to talk about it stereotype thing that's happening, but
Mhm.
it's different. It's
It
very
is.
different. And
And you
it's
see that in a lot of the 70s films. Like
yeah,
one of the best depictions I've seen, small one, but a depiction of like the truly, truly wealthy elite is in the movie Katha, like which is by Sai Paranspe. It's not the chawl scenes, it's the scenes with Malika Sarabai, because
interesting.
the way she is depicted and her home and the party and the everything, you're like, okay, this is serious money. And my suspicion is that the reason those movies actually pick up on the truly elite, the wealthy, the people who live in Mumbai and they have a, they have membership at the turf club, and it's like generations of wealth here that you're talking, and they live at
Yeah,
Altamount Road, those people. I think it's because the budgets of these movies used to be so teeny tiny that they just couldn't erect sets. So I think they basically just shot it in the rich people's homes. Like so many of Cypher Space movies, if you see how the wealthy are depicted, I don't think those are sets. I think she's basically just like
interesting.
phoning her friends and she's like, hey, so like I need to shoot at your like sea facing apartment in like Mulbar Hill or like in
Yeah.
Worli. Can I have it for a day? And I don't think that's set design. I think that's just their house. Um,
Which is indicating a certain kind of access to those people, right? That you can
yes,
be involved with the film and get the favor to use those people's homes for a couple of
right.
weeks. They're maybe up in the mountains or wherever, or in Switzerland or wherever it is that they go. Um, because
Mhm.
you can not just anyone can phone up and get that
Right.
access.
But I think there might also funnily be an aspect of elitism to it,
I'm
because it's
sure.
kind of like, yeah, like if you're that wealthy person and your friend is the Sham Benegal,
Right.
who, and your house can be shown in his movie, you're gonna say yes. But like some random person, some Dharmesh Darshan type of, I know it's a different era, but like
Right.
some Dharmesh Darshan type person calls you up, or like David Dhawan calls you up and says, can I shoot at your penthouse? You're gonna be like, hell no. You know what I mean? So there's also that also is an element of pride, right? Like who
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
fact that your friends are the intelligentsia and your friends
Mhm.
are the ones who go to Cannes and Locarno Film Festival where
Yeah.
their movies, and your sea-facing apartment is going to be shown in that. So I mean, that's also interesting. Like I love seeing the films that depict like the really elite people, because I do not come from that world.
No.
But because I studied in South Bombay and my house is in South Bombay, I have vague access to those people, but they truly do. Like the
Yeah.
1% really live a different lifestyle.
Oh, yeah.
One of my favorite stories to tell is my cousin had, again, like she had access to these like very elite people, and she went to her friend's apartment and she just didn't know what to say to the auntie, like her friend's mom. So she just commented on how she liked the painting because it had horses on it. And the auntie was like, "Oh, that's an MF Hussein. Do you like MF Hussein?" And my cousin is like, sure. My cousin knew nothing about MFSA. She was literally making conversation. And the auntie was so pleased. She took my cousin on a tour of this 4-bedroom apartment in like, in like Cuff Parade, and showed her all. And she was like, "Oh, this MFSA in our bedroom was a gift from my husband for our ex anniversary." And my cousin is like, each of these paintings cost more than
Yeah.
all of the homes that we own,
Yeah.
like in the family. Like
Yeah.
you could add that up, and they were like
Yeah.
the most normal nice people. The mom used to play the sitar, which is such a fancy thing to do. No one in my family plays the sitar, mind you.
I would love to get an Indian art knowledgeable person's opinion of
I
what's going on in
know.
Kalyug because I think it's beautiful, and I am pretty sure, even to my fairly uneducated eyes, there's a lot of depiction of deities in this film.
Mm,
I was thinking about whether this film lives in a fairly secular world despite the story, and I feel like it kind of does, except that the gods are kind of there in the background, kind of
mhm.
watching, I think, kind of
Yeah.
observing, which I do think kind of adds to the hubristicness of the characters
Mm,
of this film. So the fact that they are, carrying out things set in motion by, in the world of the story, by their various identities, I guess. But it does kind of feel like that these are human actors kind of doing something. The gods are sitting there being like, interesting, we shall now
yeah.
smite, you know.
Exactly.
And the the one of the visual themes that really gets me about this film is all the wheels that are there. So of course you think
Mm,
about cyclical time and that
yeah,
this is the Kalyug and
the wheel of
so
karma.
yeah, the wheel of karma, the chakras, all these things. So you
Mm,
get like there's a lot of dialing of rotary phones. You
mm,
get there's a car tire that's very important in one part. You have whatever it is that they're building has these big huge exhaust fans. You get a jet plane. Like there's a lot of wheels in this film, which
mm.
I'm sure is quite
Also
deliberate and
motion.
symbolic. Yeah, and motion and the idea that whatever is coming up is going to go down and then the
Yeah,
cyclical nature of these things. So and that
because this
probably, I would say
movie,
there's a futility to that, right? Like the
yes.
idea that even just you may rise, but you will fall again, but so will everything
Mm.
else. So just, you know, maybe don't try so hard. I don't know that I don't know if there's a lesson in Kalyug, but that's kind of
It's
one
a
of the
bit like
themes.
Finding Nemo, where it's like,
Just
just keep
keep
swimming.
swimming.
They just keep swimming.
Just keep
And
exploiting the masses with your labor practices. It's okay. I know.
but it's funny also because like the two movies that we chose are so similar in certain ways, but so different in other ways. And
Yeah.
one of the things, like a word I would never use to describe the world of Kalyug is the word passive. These people
Oh
are not
no.
passive. These
No.
people are doing all the
They
things
are
all
they
the
are
time.
doers.
And even when they're not doing it, they're thinking of doing it.
Yeah, and then when they're not doing it, it's because they've chosen very specifically not to do a thing. So, like, I won't
Right.
reveal who Shashi Kapoor really is. I will,
Right.
yeah, hold
Yeah.
that power back until it's absolutely necessary to reveal it. Yeah.
What's interesting about Raincoat is that Raincoat is very passive. Everyone in that movie is
Mm,
passive. Manu is passive. Niru is very passive. Niru's character actually reminded me a little bit of Sonakshi's character in Lutera, where remember there was
mm,
that like part where you and I got frustrated. We were like, "Girl, do something! You're just sitting and crying. Like,
right.
go out, go for a walk. I don't know, get a
Right.
job." There is also that same sinking feeling of morass and depression
Mm,
and just the claustrophobia of the four walls, just like, eating you alive. There's
mm,
scenes where in the movie where Ajay Devgan opens the windows because he's like, the sunlight is streaming in, but like you won't even open the windows. And then Aishwarya is like, no. And then she goes and like immediately closes them because of the creditors. So it's like this suffocating feeling because sometimes not doing anything is the worst thing you can possibly do.
right. Right.
You just need to get in motion and do something with your life, and like just that inertia can actually kill you in ways that motion actually never will. Like, okay, if you're in constant motion you might make a few missteps here and there, but at least you're in motion. And Raincoat is about these very like passive people that let things happen to them,
Yeah. That
which to
also,
some extent is also in Lutera. So I wonder if
yeah.
this is like a like an O Henry thing, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. It's that kind of that saying about you really regret the things you don't do more than
Mm,
the things you do. Um,
yes.
Interesting. I am fascinated that we both went away from mainstream Hindi cinema
Yeah.
for this. Um, I think one could argue that there is an
Mm.
element of pride in most mainstream Hindi films,
Yes.
mostly located on the mater familias, or the hero for the
Yes.
most part. So I was thinking of something like would I say that pride is sort of a major motivating factor in, say, DDLJ? I think I would actually say that. I didn't want to talk about that film, but
Yeah.
so I think I'm sure that we could have done this with much more mainstream.
K3G also, I mean, in
Yeah, K3G
K3G,
for
Amitabh's
sure.
whole issue with Kajal is that she is lower class. It's
Right,
elitism. That's why he
right.
favors Rani over her.
And
It's just
any
ego.
of the places where people are screaming about is it,
Yes.
are getting at a certain kind of a flavor of pride anyway. Um,
Yeah.
so that and that kind of like knowing your place
Mm.
um it's not exactly the same, but it's related. But I do think one of the great things about I think your idea for this series is that we're going to get to go out if
Yes.
we want to, because these things are everywhere, and there's a million billion films about greed, for example.
Yes.
Were there other films that you were considering to use to talk about pride?
Um, I was kind of thinking of Chokher Bali for
Right.
it, but then ultimately I decided that Chokher Bali was gonna be my choice for Envy,
Hmm.
because I was thinking about Binodini's character in it, the character played by Aishwarya Rai, where I was like, I do think that she is motivated to some extent by pride, or
Sure.
rather, a bruised ego is how I would put it. But then I also thought that envy seemed much more damaging.
The thing about pride, I think, is that it's the thing that often stops you from doing anything to address the other
Mm,
sins that you may be indulging in or whatever, right? Because you don't want to admit you have a problem or that you've done something wrong or that you've hurt someone or whatever it may happen to be. I was
right.
also thinking about how often lying comes up, and dishonesty is not actually one of the seven
Mm,
deadly sins, because I guess the idea, again, this is not a theology podcast, is that that these other things are actually what's motivating you to lie in some way. But I was
yeah.
thinking about, there were various films I kind of loosely considered, and I was like, I think
Mm,
actually that's just lying.
right.
And that the under the root was maybe something else. Um,
Yeah.
that wasn't as and obviously it's kind of hard to come up with a film that's more juicy than Kalyug in some ways. So
Yeah.
I'm glad I
I
have
did also
watched
think
it. But
about Abhiman because, like, Abhiman
sure.
literally means pride, but
Right.
like not like, yeah, Abhiman literally means pride. And that movie, I mean, of course, it's an adaptation of A Star Is Born, and I have loved every iteration of A Star Is Born I've seen. I love the Barbara Streisand, Chris
Mhm.
Christopherson one. I loved the Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga one. Lady Gaga like blew me away. I love that woman so much.
Mm.
She also blew me away in House of Gucci. Have you watched it?
I have watched House of
She's so
Gucci.
amazing.
That is a howler of a film to me.
I love that movie.
I mean, it is so awful in a lot of ways, but it was very fun to watch.
Yeah.
Like, it'd be a great
So
slumber party movie.
oh, it would be such a great slumber party movie. Actually, you, me, and Luncharoni should do a slumber party because Lunchy and I both loved House of Gucci, and we were constantly for a while, right after we watched it, we kept like, messaging each other like Lady Gaga's dialogues from it or whatever. It was hysterical.
I saw it by myself, which I regret, because I think it would have been much
Okay.
more fun with people. Because I don't I believe you that she has some great dialogue. I don't remember a single thing. I
Right.
What I mostly remember is, like, everyone in this movie seems to be in a different movie than each other, and, like,
Yeah.
why can they just not use their actual accents? Why are we all pretending to be Italian for for
Yeah.
just, like, the names will cover it. We all know these people are Italian, like,
Right,
it's built
right,
and many of these people are Italian American, so, like, just
right.
let it it's fine.
But yeah, so sorry, I digress. But anyway, I love the Bradley Cooper, Lady Gaga, A Star Is Born also, and then I also love Abhiman. I think these are the only three versions of A Star Is Born that I've seen. Is there a more recent Bollywood version of A Star Is Born that I'm not aware of?
One of
No,
the Ashikis is kind of that, isn't it?
I have not watched any of those.
Yeah,
I
I haven't
refuse
either.
to.
I
I
mean,
absolutely refuse to.
many stories about a creative artist or performing
Mm,
artist in some ways are going to have a sense of the pride issue in them in
yes.
some way, and maybe even hubris, especially as you think about people who are creating something, and are they, taking on too much of the divine, to be a creator and that kind of thing. So a lot of those I think would be
Or
good
the
fodder for
student going
pride.
ahead of the
Oh,
master.
yes. Yes, that's a
Because
good
with
one.
A Star Is Born, there's so many different elements of pride. Okay, first of all, there's like the masculine pride
Mm,
that the man has, where he's the
mhm,
star and you're just
mhm,
the little satellite. So there's that. Then there's also the privilege that they
mhm,
have, that there's also I am the master, you are the student, for whatever reason they've decided that, and
mhm.
then it's like, how dare you get ahead of me? So there's like so much of the bruising of the ego and a fragility, and not wanting other people to shine because you think if you let someone else shine, it's gonna dim your light, which is so bullshit. But that is what that whole thing is about. But ultimately, I decided for my mental health, I did not want to rewatch Abhiman.
That's fair.
It
That's
is an
fair.
exhausting movie. I think it's a great movie. I like it personally. I think Jai Bachchan is great in it. I think Amitabh Bachchan is so punchable and slappable,
Mm,
but that's because
the
he is
point.
meant to be that.
Yeah.
I actually think that him in Abhiman is so much more memorable than either Chris Christopherson or Bradley Cooper in
Mm.
those films. Whereas I think all the women were on par for me. Um, but he's just so slappable, and I was like, "Do I wanna spend my evening watching this? Probably not. I'll just
That
rewatch
I
Raincoat."
that might be a theme of these films that we're gonna talk about for this series, right? I think some of
Hmm.
them, we if we don't choose wisely, we might find ourselves in a bit of a morass,
Yes.
mental health wise. Like, I think that, or emotional health wise anyway, this is gonna be, some of these might be rough.
Yeah.
But I suspect there are also, I mean, we could think about it. easily that there will be ones where some of these are treated in a comic way, particularly lust
Yes.
and gluttony, I think are the ones that are
Yeah.
like the bodily ones are more ripe for like a humorous treatment, for example. So
Well, I'll tell you what movie I've picked for Greed, and it's actually a mainstream movie, and it's a movie that I desperately want to talk about so much. The movie I actually picked is Judai. And so that has Sri Devi as the greedy person, and it has Anil Kapoor and it has Urmila. It is not a perfect movie by any stretch of the imagination, but it's so meaty. Like there is so much to chomp on, Beth. There's so much to say. And that does have like a very strong comic angle to it. Like Sri Devi is a greedy person, but she's also like a funny person and she makes me giggle when she's on screen.
I'm trying
Have
to
you
remember
seen
if I've,
Judai?
that's what I'm just trying to remember. Um,
I can't remember who the director is. Is it? I don't think
Raj
it's David
Kanwar
Dhawan.
says Wikipedia.
Okay.
I think I'm getting this mixed up with a completely different film.
Are
So
you mixing
no,
up with Ladla?
I am, which I have love. You better, you better, whatever it is that she says.
Because Ladla also has Sridevi and, Anil
That's what
Kapoor.
I love
Yeah,
Ladla. Yeah. So
without
no,
being Mr. India.
I
Yeah,
have
no,
not
so
seen this,
Judai is
so I should see it. My
you should
film,
watch it for
I will.
Sridevi.
My film for Greed is Bluffmaster because
I know, you told me.
that came to mind and I was like, oh, that'd be fun to rewatch. So there's a
I
comic
actually
one.
don't remember Bluffmaster at all. I saw it a really long time ago, but I
Yeah.
never rewatched it, so
I listen to that soundtrack
it's so good.
once every couple of months at least. Like the CD literally lives in my car. I
I
listen to
know.
it fairly regularly. So, but I haven't seen the film itself in a long time, so that was fun to revisit. Um, so I look forward to
Oh,
that
I know
conversation.
another movie that I thought of for Pride, but then I decided not to because, I'd spoken about it in the Vahida episode, and that was, Guide.
Sure. Yeah.
Because Devanand's character and then also Raman's character, there's a lot of pride, there's a lot of hubris in it. Again, there is
Yeah.
the crisis of the artiste.
Yes.
There is all of that in that, but
Yes.
that's also a good movie to talk about for Pride. I think Pride is. I did read because I was reading about a little bit about like the Roman Catholicism thing about the seven deadly sins, and I believe that theologically, pride is considered the absolute worst, which is why it comes first. And there
Yeah.
is a sense of that umbrella term of where everything else kind of falls in under pride. So it's
Yeah.
the seven deadly sins are not created equal. I think the six are equal, and then pride just stands on its own as sort of like this horrible thing to be. Um, so,
Because
and
it's
I
the
would,
one where you are trying to be more like something you're not, right? Like it's got
right.
that the divine is going to need to like step on you feel to it, which
Crush you like the ant you are.
so many religions want to do. So
Oh, there was another movie I wanted to like, okay, not seriously talk about pride, but knowing me, it could have been a serious decision. I wanted to talk about The Mummy. The Brendan Fraser movie, because
okay.
there's so much pride in that too. It's like the pharaohs and the Tutankhamuni things, and then the archaeologists, and like you can make an entire podcast on movies where like Western archaeologists basically like loot and pillage like Egypt or ancient cultures like that, and then they get smited in this case by the mummy. And I was like, will Beth like unfriend me and block me from
Oh
everything, and
no.
like if I talk about the mummy?
So as many of you know, I work in a World Cultures Museum, and until quite recently, we did have a mummified human on display. It is no longer on display. Um, and the number of questions I got about that based on that movie from children on tours over the years, like I can't even tell you. And I for a long time resisted seeing the movie because I
It's
was
so
so tired
good.
of hearing about it from kids. So
Right.
I did recently finally watch it. It's delightful.
I
Um,
love it.
if you are into The Mummy, you should watch, I'll put it in the comment or the description. There's a video by one of my favorite YouTube people. She's a cosplayer primarily. Her name's
Ah.
Rachel Maxey, and she watches The Mummy with an actual Egyptologist, and their commentary is going.
Oh, that would be amazing.
It has millions of views. It's very, very funny. So I will put that in there. You would like it, I think.
I would like it.
Because of course there's a
So,
lot of nonsense happening.
as a museum professional, how do you feel about movies like Night at the Museum and things like that?
Night at the Museum, I love. Now, I'm going to put aside the very important question of museums, primarily in the West, having things that they should not have.
Right.
That is a huge problem. I'm glad there's some reckoning coming. I'm going to put that aside when we're talking about these movies
Mm.
for a second. The Night at the Museum movies I love because that captures something that I think everyone who loves museums has thought about whether they've really articulated it to themselves or not, but like,
Mm,
wouldn't it be fun to be here overnight? What happens when all the lights go off? My
yeah.
experience as more than 20 years in the museum field is absolutely nothing happens when the lights go off.
Oh.
Other people may have different experiences. My museum, for example, we have had employees who would swear they've seen ghosts. Now, I don't believe in ghosts, so that's their experience. That's what their brain is telling them that they are experiencing, whatever. But and we were built in the year 2000, so it's not like an old building.
Right.
um, but and I have known other museum professionals in other museums who would swear that they have experienced ghosts. But the
How
idea of,
wonderful.
it's also so fun to think about the objects having their own lives at night when
Yeah.
nobody's looking and that they interact with each other. And that's the first one in particular. I think that's so fun, the way the objects kind of like, they interact and have all these adventures together when the humans aren't looking, which is incredibly charming. Movies that are more about archaeology, I think, are they get at that. I think there's something deeply, deeply human about wanting to know about our own pasts,
Yeah.
whether very specifically your own family or more broadly humankind. Um, Egypt in particular is fascinating because Egypt has seemed exotic to almost everyone
Yes.
for 5,000 years at this point. Like, human written
Mhm.
history has almost always seen Egypt as exotic. And the
Yeah.
fact that the culture that made those things that we find so interesting, the fact that that culture is, for all
Yeah.
intents and purposes, non-existent, makes it sort of safer to muck around in that. So, like, you're
Right.
not
It
gonna
does.
offend as many people that way. Now,
Yeah.
there are many people in modern day Egypt who feel deep connections to these things, and you know, uh, this is not fully a dead culture in some ways, but like there aren't very many people who believe in Ra anymore, for example.
Right,
So
right. Or
it's not quite as
Bastet, which makes my
right.
cats very sad.
Right. So Egypt in particular, I think, has a draw to it. Also, it's just so unlike anything else in terms of the visual arts and the architecture. Like, nobody is making pyramids exactly like that anywhere else. Like, step
Yeah.
pyramids, yes, exist in Central America and Mesoamerica,
Mm.
for example, but like those smooth-sided, absolutely massive things, nobody else is doing. So that I get the appeal of that. That like it's us, but then it's very much not us at the same time, which is a
Yeah.
pretty irresistible combination to humans, I think.
They have that also that visual advantage that the state of Rajasthan has, which is all those shifting sands and everything.
Very
It
beautiful.
just is beautiful. How can you take a bad
And also,
photo
like,
of
a little bit
Egypt?
perilous too, right? Like, that if you
Yes.
step a little too far out, you're gonna die because there's not enough
Yeah.
water or whatever. And then obviously things like, human remains are something that most cultures have complicated, and long established
Mhm.
thoughts and feelings and procedures around whatever those may happen to be. So when you encounter a group that does death very differently than you, that's a
Mhm.
very agitating and unsettling
Yeah.
experience. So Egypt really, ancient Egypt really has a whole lot of facets to it that almost everybody else finds
It's a very
fascinating.
cinematic
Oh, very cinematic.
culture slash civilization slash like I
It's
could I it
gold. It's huge.
yeah.
There's humans with animal heads. There's
There's
like,
curses.
there's curses. There's, a writing that was for a long time undeciphered by anyone else.
Hieroglyphics,
Like,
scarab
yeah,
beetles. Oh, I
yeah,
love it. Eye makeup, all the fancy eye makeup that had
yeah.
lead in it that killed people early,
A
the
very
mercury
strong,
poisoning.
a very strong vibe, a very strong
Yes.
aesthetic.
Very strong aesthetic. Like that aesthetic is still gorgeous. I was watching Mummy 2 also, which is very bad. I don't recommend
Mm.
watching Mummy 2. Mummy is far better. But in Mummy 2, I was like, ah, I love her cat eyeliner. She needs to do like a YouTube tutorial or something because like I want to look like Aminette. And then I was like, oh wait, that's probably not how they actually look. This is just Hollywood's version of it.
This is where I will plug, if I have not already, the absolutely bananas film, Gods of Egypt from, I don't know, like 8, 9 years ago. That movie is off its rocker. You should definitely watch it. It would be much better if Bollywood had made it because it needs
Mm.
musical sequences. Frankly, that movie is really sorely lacking in song
Yeah, like
sequences.
a Suraj Hua Madham kind of a thing, right?
You
Like
could
we
do
need
any and
that.
everything, and there's already the cast of thousands there, and they've got all these amazing sets and costumes and everything. Like, why is there no musical sequence?
True, true. Have you ever watched Cleopatra, the one with Elizabeth Taylor?
No, believe it or
I
not.
want
I
to
know I
watch
need
it.
to. I know.
It looks so grand and also so bad at the same time. But like the jewelry, and I think Elizabeth Taylor wore a lot of her own jewelry. in the movie.
Speaking as an Elizabeth, I feel like maybe we should watch this and then do an episode on it. And because
Yeah,
that is a very filmy film, I'm sure.
I'm sure it is very filmy. I've heard it's supposed to be, like, pretty bad, though. Which when has that ever stopped us from watching movies, Beth? We're not my favorite movie is Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham. I am no authority on good cinema.
That is in the eye of the beholder, and we may behold it differently.
Okay, so what is one thing that you are most proud of in a good
Oh.
way? Because
Oh,
pride
in
can be
a
a good thing
good
too. We all need to love
way.
ourselves.
Oh. Um, oh gosh. This has been kind of I've seen this on Twitter in the last couple days because we're recording
Oh,
this on New
have you?
Year's Day, 2024. So like what's something you've done or in the last year that you're proud of? And I've kind of had a hard time with that one, but um I well, I'll bring this back to the museum thing. The place I work has really been doing a lot of work to reckon with some of the bad things about museums in the
Mm,
West and in America in particular. And I think we're doing a really good job at turning our ship around in some ways. And I get to be a part of a lot of those things. And I'm
oh,
really
good.
proud of I'm really proud of the work that we're doing and the number of people from various communities in our area who have come forward and say, we want to work with you. We trust you to help us tell our story or something like that. And that means more to me than I can ever possibly
Yeah.
express. And I actually got to show one of those projects to the head of the Smithsonian, who was on our campus for a completely different, he was receiving an honorary doctorate at graduation. And because we are a Smithsonian affiliate, which many museums are, he came to see us and I got to show him a project that I had worked on about local AIDS quilt panels that were on display in the museum and that we continue to work with. That was a project that came to us out of from the local queer community.
Mm,
And that's the thing I'm most proud of in my entire career. And the fact that I got to show it to the head of the Smithsonian and he said,
yeah.
this is what museums should be doing. I was like, it's like the
Oh,
best thing that anyone's ever said to me. That was
that's
not actually
lovely.
23, that was 2022. But yeah, I'm proud of what my colleagues and I are beginning to do and to learn and to try to keep going. What's something you're proud of?
I'm proud of the fact that I always take chances.
Oh,
Yeah.
you do.
I fail a lot and spectacularly. And I have many, many interesting stories and anecdotes to tell of me just like flaming out.
You
But
keep
even when
going.
I flame out, it's in a blaze of glory. And then all my friends are shaking their head and going, I worry about you. I worry about you so much. My friend Nikki just told me yesterday she worries about me. I was like, great, wonderful. But
But I
then I
don't think
try again.
but you don't worry about you, and that shows
I don't worry
I don't
about
think and,
me.
like, that's a remarkable set of, like,
I leave that to
self-knowledge.
others. I give other people
But
sleepless
you
nights.
know you
I
don't
sleep
need
like
to
a baby.
worry, right?
Yeah.
You got this.
Okay. Now, what is something you're not proud of yourself and
Oh,
that you would like to perhaps change?
I love to shop on Poshmark and eBay, and I buy too many things. It's clothes specifically. I like, it's very easy. You can shop online for clothing very successfully in a lot of ways. So it's not the online thing, but for me, it's a little bit too much like I'll be watching a movie and I see someone in a whatever, and I'm like, ooh, I could use a thing, whatever. Now, I'm not buying like the fancy brands or anything. This is
Right.
like a $23 at a time thing, but like that adds up and it's like consumption that I don't need. So I
Right.
actually have Pitu inspired me to get this book called Q&A a day, which gives you a writing prompt for a little question for every day. And you can start it at any time of the year. Like I started mine in October, I think. And one of them recently was it goals or something? There was one quite recently that was about, I think something you want to improve on or whatever. And I actually
Okay.
wrote down like, I need to get a handle on this because I buy something, I wear it 3 times and then I donate it. Like that's
Mm.
and I'm buying secondhand, but still, like, it's still consumption and so
You need to
I'm
be
not
more Marie Kondo about it.
uh, I really hate everything about her, but I need to be
Really?
more deliberate and thoughtful and, like,
Mm.
use what I already have because I
Yeah.
like the things I already have, like,
Right. You
um,
need to shop your own closet.
shop my own closet, like, I think this is actually going to be one of the reasons I'm going to maybe get off Instagram for a while is just, like, not
Mm.
seeing ads for things, like, you know,
So many ads.
kind of look from within the things that I already have and already love, right? Like, so I
What especially infuriates me about Instagram ads is I keep getting Instagram ads for like Botox and stuff like that. And I'm like fiercely anti Botox. And I'm like,
right.
will you stop? I do not wanna age in, like, a weird duck lip kind of a way, like, I go to Beverly Hills sometimes and I see the people and I don't want that, so stop it, you're infuriating me right now. So, yes, like,
They see
enough
a
with that
they get a
bullshit.
demographic about you, and then they make all these assumptions, which
Yeah.
is really frustrating. What's one of yours?
Um I'm not proud of my temper. I have
Mm.
always had a short fuse, and I think I'm getting better at it. Like when I was a teenager, I was an absolute hellion. I was horrible. But I think I've gotten better about it, and now I have like strategies to control it. Where if I get mad, I'll count to 10. I'll take a deep
Mm,
breath. My therapist told me like a really cool thing many years ago, where my therapist said, think of like a pot of boiling water. It doesn't go from like room temperature to like boiling in like a second, right? It
right.
takes some time to get there. So he said when someone is making you mad or you're getting mad or whatever, before you get to that boiling point, that is when you need to like intercede. And so you should be like, so he literally told me to say to people, I'm starting to boil up, like I'm starting to reach my boiling point. So we need to like de-escalate right now. And so
Turn the
I
flame
would say
off.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would do that and I would like back away. And that actually as a strategy really helped me. But I still have a long way to go.
So for you, the wrath episode is going to be something,
Yes.
and I think mine would have to be gluttony, like the
The wrath
acquisition thing.
episode. I'm gonna be like, okay, but that's not wrong, you guys.
It me. I feel it.
Yeah,
I
I'm gonna be like,
empathize.
it correct. We should be like this. Like it should be like दुनिया को जला के राख कर डालूंगा. It should be that. I recently realized that I had been singing the Indian World Cup song wrong. My husband pointed it out. It's like an old World Cup song that I really like. It's called
Hmm.
Come On India Dikha. That's just what the song is, right? It was very catchy. It's like, Come on India Dikha. And then I don't know what the second line is, but I've always sung for like 15 odd years. I've been singing Dunia ko jala do. Like burn the world. And I was walking my dog the other day and I was like, come on, India, dikha do, dunia ko jala do. My husband's like, excuse me, what? That is not the song. So I need to read about it. I was like, that sounds perfectly acceptable. Like in the fighting sporting spirit, like, yeah, India needs to win the match and also burn everyone. And he was like, no, they don't.
You should rewrite it to be about gelato.
Yes, but that's not my
Maybe it could be more
vibe.
like a giving, like,
A
"And we give
giving.
you some gelato."
Okay, I actually like that you're trying to make me a better person. So I will rewrite that.
I
I'll be
just
like,
like
"Come
ice
on,
cream.
India, dikha do, dunya ko de do, gelato." I will do that. I think the wrath and gluttony episodes are going to be very
Yep,
interesting because I'm going to
yep.
tie myself into a not defending the people, and you're going to tie yourself into a not defending the gluttons. Okay, well, I think that concludes our episode. Did you have any parting thoughts? We did plenty of like tangential statements today.
I mean, if you've never heard the dictum, "Pride comes before a fall," the
Mm.
people of Kalyug are here to show you how that happens.
Yes. So we want to hear from you guys which movies you associate with pride. What do you think about those? Have you seen Kalyug? Have you seen Raincoat? Um, what movie speaks to you as far as pride is concerned? And why do you think that pride is such a bad thing? Because I'm not sure it's always a bad thing, but often
Not
it
always.
is.
Nope.
And then what sins are you excited to hear us talk about? There's so many and we're going to get through the list. But if there's especially a movie that you want us to talk about in one of the
Yeah,
other sins episodes, let us know. And, if we've seen it, we'll talk about it as well. So thank you for watching Filmy Ladies. We just want to say we're so grateful to have you guys listen to our rambling every week and all the nice comments and suggestions you give us. And then we really love this tiny little cute community we've set up where everyone is so thoughtful and lovely. And we learn so much from your comments. So thank
absolutely.
you and have a happy new year. And don't be too prideful.